Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're back at it again with another video on Moon Knight's director, Mohammed Diab, coming out and trashing another DC property. So first and foremost, he trashed Black Adam, which I did a video on. Lots of people were like, "You're being a massive hypocrite and you're being really stupid because you've sort of rallied against Lord of the Rings and their race swapping." Wait, we'll address that because I don't want people to think I'm a hypocrite. But there is a nuanced argument between two of them. And it's not as simple as you're race swapping. That's not the argument. The argument's a little bit deeper than that. I appreciate on face value it looks somewhat hypocritical if you don't understand the context behind each argument. So we'll kind of get to that in a moment. But anyway, Mohammed Diab is now trashing Wonder Woman and says that the Egyptian set scenes were a disgrace. Shock horror. I mean, pretty stern words. Little does this chap know that, of course, there's lots of countries that are stand-in for other countries. Believe it or not, ladies and gents, you know, the Batman wasn't filmed in Gotham City. In fact, it wasn't even filmed in America. A lot of it was filmed in the UK. So even its fictional place of Gotham City in America wasn't filmed in America. I know it's shocking, isn't it, that a lot of these places have stand-ins. I mean, I spoke recently to Richard Stanley of The Color Out of Space, and he revealed hilariously, and I thought it was genuinely quite hilarious, how they filmed essentially what would be, you know, Arkham, New England, over in Portugal. Of all places. Fascinating. Genuinely fascinating. But there's loads of places which are stand-ins for loads of other things. They can't actually film in a lot of those places directly. Especially Egypt. It's not a wholly safe place to go. There are regularly travel restrictions, or not travel restrictions, but travel warnings for the potential of dangers and things like that. And a studio's not going to want to load up with a great deal of security for places like that. You know, and again, I'm not saying specifically Egypt, but Egypt has been known to have those warnings attributed to it because, you know, it's not a incredibly stable place. It's just not, and it's not hugely safe. But I mean, there's loads of other places like Israel, for instance. Of course, Israel. A load of those places are not specifically safe in that part of the world. Not stable anyway. So it's not a surprise that, you know, film studios choose not to take huge talent over there that could be a target. It's not a surprise. I don't understand why this director seems to not get this. But let's take a look at his argument, and then I want to touch on whether I was a hypocrite or not with respect to Lord of the Rings. And I know that there's a load of people that will instantly just say, yes, you were, but it's not. That's not the case. The arguments are actually two different arguments. So let's dive into it, and then I'll kind of repeat what I said with Black Adam. We'll go from there, shall we? So Moon Knight director Mohammed Diab says Wonder Woman 1984's Egypt set scenes were a disgrace. Really, really strong language. And it is actually strong language even when you dive into the direct quote. So he says, in my pitch, there was a big part about Egypt and how inauthentically it has been portrayed throughout Hollywood's history. And I'll agree with that, for sure. It hasn't been portrayed authentically. Now he says it's always exotic. We call it Orientalism. It dehumanizes us. We're always naked. We're always sexy. You're saying that as if that's a bad thing. We're like, what's wrong with being portrayed as a sexy nationality? I don't really see what's wrong with that, but all right. We're always bad. We're always over the top. Yeah, I mean maybe, but you know, especially in a comic book movie, it will be portrayed cartoonish. That's the whole point. I don't think necessarily saying that the location is portrayed as exotic dehumanizes anyone. I would definitely argue against that, but never mind. Now he says, you never see Cairo, as if that's a huge problem. You always see Jordan shot for Cairo, Morocco shot for Cairo, sometimes Spain shot for Cairo. Again, fine. What's the issue with that? There isn't actually a problem with that. That's genuinely like... I mean, parts of Indiana Jones 5 again, was shot up in Glasgow. I'm pretty certain, or Edinburgh. Glasgow or Edinburgh. And that's to replicate where? America. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's time, money, budget. There's loads of reasons why they would do that. There's no issue with that at all. Again, going back to the argument of Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, a place which is firmly supposed to be, because the locations, the shires, are actually shires in the UK, was shot in New Zealand. It worked. It looked great. It doesn't look like what it's supposed to look like, and that's actually one of the ones which has turned out better. But you didn't see people up in arms about that. Now, anyway, he says, this really angers us. I remember seeing Wonder Woman 1984, and there was a big sequence in Egypt, and it was a disgrace for us. You had a sheikh that doesn't make any sense to us. Egypt looked like a country from the Middle Ages. It looked like the desert. Well, I think it was. I mean, it wasn't the entirety of Egypt, was it, Mohammed? Like, let's be honest. It was genuinely just a small bit supposed to, represent a small chunk of Egypt. It wasn't the entirety of Egypt. You bloody turd blossom. Come on now. And yes, stereotypically, when people think of Egypt, they do genuinely think of a desert. Okay, sure. But because large parts of it are a desert. I mean, you come from there, you do know that. Now, he also says the following to boost the show. And this is terrible PR for the show, just as an FYI. It's really, really bad. He says it's part of the show because it's part of the comic book. It's part of how he gets his powers. It's ingrained in it. There was definitely room to play in Moon Knight, but keep it as authentic as possible in the realm of being fantastical. Even in the original comic books, they did a great job of researching and trying to make Egypt authentic. So, basically, Wonder Woman's a disgrace because they didn't shoot it in Egypt. And they made it look like a desert. Now, this is terrible PR for a series which people are genuinely looking forward to. Marvel really should get this guy to shut his mouth. They really, really should. Like, it's not good PR by any stretch of the imagination. It is really, really bad. It makes you look like a whiny bitch. Now, let's address his comments on Black Adam. He started to basically slam Black Adam for not being diverse enough. And the counter-argument to that was, well, one, they did hire half Samoan, half black guy to play the lead. They did race swap Hawkman and the lady in it. I can't remember the comic book characters' names, like Tornado or something like that. I can't remember. But basically, they race swapped a bunch of characters. That's pretty diverse anyway. But his main gripe is that they didn't cast Egyptians. It's Kandak. It's not Egypt. And you could say, well, it's supposed to be based in Egypt. Yeah, sure. I guess so. But by that metric, like, it's set thousands of years in the past, pre-Egypt anyway. It's not going to happen. Now, the argument I used against that was, well, it's fantastical, it's this, it's that, blah, 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 it doesn't really matter. And a lot of people were very, very quick to jump on that and say, oh, gotcha, you're a hypocrite, because of the Lord of the Rings sentiment. Now, the argument against race swapping in Lord of the Rings is actually much more nuanced than that, because, well, casting a black dwarf breaks the internal biological logic of the universe. They can't be black. They're underground, right? But not only that, right? We're not just flip-flopping characters around needlessly. The argument that Mohammed Dihab had was that they didn't cast an Egyptian. Not that they didn't cast someone that looked Egyptian. Like if you go up, like The Rock in this film, he's going to look, an Egyptian type, right? It's a stereotypical, an Egyptian type character in terms of skin tone, right? A sort of olive, darker than olive sort of skin. He's going to look that type. And that's fine. The argument, except for Mohammed Diab, no one's complaining that he's not Egyptian. But the argument, and that's not breaking against the canon either, right? The character looks about what The Rock looks like. Now, the argument for Lord of the Rings, again, much more nuanced than that. The author, in terms of race-swapping characters in Lord of the Rings, you have the author very actually specifically stating what the characters look like. They were that for a reason. The internal biological logic of the universe, the actual biology of the universe is set for a specific reason. Not only that, you know why they were doing it, because they were just flip-flopping right on the back end of that, because you didn't even have the bloody beard on the dwarf. So you know that they're just swapping things for argument's sake. Because points. And the argument for Lord of the Rings swapping things out isn't just a case of, oh, well, it's fantastical. Because the argument people were using was, oh, you can do anything in a fantastical world. It doesn't really matter. Sure, I mean, you can, but it still has to fit into the internal logic that the universe creator created. Because if you don't fit that internal logic of the world, it becomes very disbelievable. But not only that, swapping things out left, right, and centre in the manner that Lord of the Rings did just shows the level of disrespect to the author actually intended, right? So they changed stuff with an intention of just mindlessly swapping stuff out. They specifically did that. The push is diversity. Whereas Black Adam has had people cast in the roles, like The Rock, for instance. That film's not going to get made unless The Rock's leading the charge. It took ages for that film to even get made with The Rock leading the charge. But that film was made because of The Rock. You swap him out and you wait for them to get it made, it's probably not going to get made. But anyway, I'm sure there'll be people that will still think, oh, you're a hypocrite, blah, 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 blah. I disagree. The arguments are quite different. And not only that, Mohammed Diab's argument for hiring people for Egypt in his series were all behind the camera. They weren't in front of the camera. Like, Mark Spector is Jewish, right? He's American Jewish. Now, Oscar Isaacs is not Jewish, evangelical Christian, if I remember rightly from my research. Very, very Christian upbringing, in fact. It's not Jewish. Guatemalan as well, American Guatemalan. Not quite the same, is it? So the point of that video was to highlight the ludicrous nature of the points that he was being raised, because not only did he not hire Egyptians in front of the camera, he also just didn't even hire the lead, and it's pointless. Anyway, whatever. I've talked enough bollocks. Let me know what you think down below. Cheers, guys. Take care.